Hello there, Mr. Sutton here with the IM378 Part 2 homework solutions on reference angles.
For this problem, I want the reference angle for 150 degrees. So just thinking about the closest x-axis angle, this is closest to 180. To get the distance between this and 180, the positive distance, I just do 180 minus 150, which gives me 30 degrees. For this one, I'm trying to get the reference angle for 240. So the closest x-axis angle to 240 is 180. To find the distance between this, which is the reference angle, the distance between this and 180, I have to subtract 180 from 240. So that ends up giving me 60 degrees for my reference angle. On this problem, I'm trying to find the reference angle for 2 pi over 3 in degrees. Let me convert this to degrees right away, because I'm going there anyway. So if I were to multiply this by 180 over pi, 180 divided by 3 gives me 60, and 2 times 60 is going to be 120, and the pi's cancel. So this is really 120 degrees. Now I need to figure out the distance between this and the closest x-axis angle. That's going to be my reference angle. Well, this is closest to 180. To get that distance between those, I have to do 180 minus 120, and that gives me 60 degrees. On this one, I want the reference angle for this angle that's in radians, but I want the reference angle in degrees. So let me convert this to degrees first. That makes it a little easier to deal with. So multiplying by 180 over pi, 180 divided by 6 is 30, and 30 times 7 gives me 210 degrees. So now I need to figure out the distance between this and the closest x-axis angle. That would be 180. To get that distance, I have 210 minus 180, which gives me 30 degrees. For this problem, I'm trying to find the distance between 410 and the closest x-axis angle. That would be my reference angle. So the closest x-axis angle is actually going to be 360 degrees, which also is 0 degrees, but we've gone past 360, so that's kind of our reference point. So to figure out how far this is from 360, let me subtract 360. If nothing else, that'll give me an angle that's between 0 and 360. So 410 minus 360 gives us 50 degrees. And since 50 degrees is in the first quadrant, it is itself the distance between the angle and the x-axis. So 50 degrees is our reference angle. To find the reference angle for 635 degrees, let me first subtract 360 so I can at least figure out where that is in just one rotation around the unit circle. So subtracting 360, let's see here, 600 minus 300 would be 335. Subtract another 60, and we have 275. Okay, so now I need to figure out the distance between 275 and the closest x-axis angle. 275 is just a little bit past 270, which is kind of the halfway point between 180 and 360. So this is closer to the 360 side. So to figure out the distance between this and the x-axis, at least angularly, I need to do 360 minus 275. I'd rather not, because that's kind of tricky to do without a calculator, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. So let's see here. 360 minus 280 would be 80 degrees, and this is going to be 5 more than that. So that's going to be 85 degrees for my reference angle. To figure out the reference angle for this one, let me first convert it to degrees. I'm going to have to do it at some point anyway. So if I multiply by 180 over pi, I've got 180 divided by 6, giving me 30, and then negative 5 times 30 is negative 150. So that's our normal angle. That's the original angle anyway, in degrees. Now to figure out the reference angle for this, I'm going to add 360 so that I can figure out where this is between 0 and 360. I have a much easier time visualizing it if I have an angle between 0 and 360. So adding 360 to that, you're basically doing 360 minus 150, which is 210 degrees. And now to get the reference angle, that's going to be the distance between this and the closest x-axis angle. 210 is closer to the 180 side of things. So we're going to do 210 minus 180 to get that positive distance. And that ends up giving us 30 degrees for the reference angle. On this one, I want to figure out how far 135 is from the closest x-axis angle. That would happen to be 180. It's closer to 180 than it is 360. So we just do, to get that distance, we just do 180 minus 135, which gives us 45 degrees. On this one, I want the reference angle for 345, so I'm asking how far is this from the closest x-axis angle. This is closer to the 360 end of the x-axis, and to get the distance from 360, we just have to subtract this from 360. 360 minus 345 gives us 15 degrees. To get the reference angle for this one, let's first convert it into degrees by multiplying by 180 over pi. 180 divided by 4 is 45. 5 times 45 is 225 degrees. And I'm asking how far is this from the closest x-axis angle? That's the reference angle. So this is closer to the 180 end than it is to the 360 end. So I have to figure out how far this is from 180. Well, to do that, I just have to subtract 180 from 225 if I want a positive distance anyway. So 225 minus 180 is going to give me 45 degrees. For this problem, I want the reference angle for negative 120. Well, it would help if I knew where this actually was on the unit circle. I have no idea where these negative angles are. So let me add 360 to get an angle that's pretty much the same angle, but it's positive. So that would end up being 240. So that's equivalent to negative 120. Now to get the reference angle, I'm asking how far is 240 from the closest x-axis angle. The closest angle on the x-axis is 180. So that's going to be, to find the distance between this and 180, I just have to do 240 minus 180, which gives me 60 degrees. On this problem, I want the reference angle for 210 degrees. So I'm asking, what is the distance between this and the closest x-axis angle, which is 180. So to find the distance from this to 180, we do 210 minus 180, which is 30 degrees. For this problem, I'm looking for the reference angle on this. Let me first get this to be in degrees. I'll need to do it anyway. So if I multiply this by 180 over pi, 180 divided by 18 is 10, and we have negative 13 times 10 giving me 130 degrees. So that was just our first step to get degrees. But now to get the reference angle, well, I have no idea where this is on the unit circle, so let me add 360 so that I can get an angle that's pretty much the same position, but at least is within the regular unit circle. So negative 130 plus 360, that's going to be 230 degrees. And now for the reference angle, I'm just asking how far is this from the closest x-axis angle. Well, this is closer to the 180 side of things, so I'm going to do 230 then minus 180 to get that distance. And that's going to give me 50 degrees. For this one, I want the reference angle for 370. Well, let me subtract 360 from this to at least figure out where this is on the regular unit circle. So that would be 10 degrees. And now for the reference angle, I just need to know how far this is from the closest x-axis angle. Well, the closest angle on the x-axis is actually 0 degrees. How far is 10 from 0? Well, it's 10 degrees away from 0. So 10 is actually its own reference angle. On this problem, I want the reference angle for this thing here. Let me get this into degrees, and then I'll figure out the reference angle. So if I multiply by 180 over pi, 180 divided by 9 is 20. 20 times 20 is 400 degrees. Now to get the reference angle, I have no idea where this is on the unit circle, so let me subtract 360 from it so I can get something that is more recognizable within the regular unit circle. 400 minus 360 is going to give me 40 degrees. And for the reference angle, I just want to know how far this is away from the x-axis, the closest x-axis angle. Well, the closest angle on the x-axis is 0, and 40 is 40 away from 0. So 40 is actually the reference angle. To find the reference angle for this one, I have to first convert it into degrees. I mean, I need to do it eventually anyway. Might as well do it now. So multiplying by 180 over pi, 180 divided by 4, that one's a little tricky, but I happen to know that's 45. Factors of 180 are helpful here. And then 7 times 45, if we count by 45s, that ends up being 315 degrees. But you could multiply it out longhand if you needed to. So where is 315? Well, that's in the fourth quadrant. And I'm trying to figure out how far this is from the closest x-axis angle. So the closest x-axis angle is actually going to be 360 on the right side of the unit circle. How far is this from 360? I can figure that out by doing 360 minus 315, which gives me 45 degrees.